Please give rise to bodhicitta, thinking I will establish all limitless mother sentient beings at the level of perfect, complete enlightenment. To that end, I will listen to this profound Dharma and put it into practice. The Dharma we speak of today is a torch lighting the way to freedom, complete instructions on the preliminary practice of the profound and secret heart essence of the Dakini. This is comprised of three main parts: virtuous beginning, middle, and end. Having completed the virtuous beginning, we're looking at the virtuous middle, the main body of the text, which is comprised of two main parts: how to follow a spiritual friend, the route of the path, and the main explanation of the stages for setting out on the path. We've covered the first and are now looking at the second, the main explanation of the stages for setting out on the path. This has two sections: the general preliminary practices for practice sessions, and then secondly, the specific preliminary practices for the yogas of the two phases. We've covered the first and are looking at the second, which itself is comprised of two subsections: the common preliminaries of the four mind changings and the uncommon special preliminaries that sow the seeds of the profound path in 5 stages. We have covered the first, the four common preliminaries of the four mind changings, and we're currently looking at the second, the uncommon special preliminaries in 5 stages. So these 5 stages are taking refuge, the essence of the path, arousing bodhicitta, the root of the whole path, purifying negative actions and obscurations through the practice of Vajrasattva, the mandala offering, and Guru Yoga. From among these 5, we have completed the first, taking refuge, the entrance of the path, and we're now looking at the second, arousing the mindset on supreme enlightenment, the root of the whole path. And this itself, this section has 2 main parts: general points to be understood and the points of the training in this case. We're currently looking at the first, which is comprised of 7 different points: the definition of the arousing of bodhicitta, categories, the particular reference, how bodhicitta is aroused, the ritual for taking the vow, a teaching on training in the precepts, and an explanation of the benefits. From among these 7, we're currently looking at the 6th. We've covered the first 5, and we're currently looking at the 6th, a teaching on training in the precepts. So this explanation of the precepts has a few different sections. The actual precepts and an explanation of the circumstances in which bodhicitta declines. So the actual precepts are divided into 2: the precepts of bodhicitta in aspiration and those of bodhicitta in action. So we've covered the precepts of bodhicitta in aspiration. We're now looking at the precepts of bodhicitta in action, or application bodhicitta. So this has 3 parts. The precepts of bodhicitta in action have 3 parts: maturing oneself by training in the 6 transcendent perfections, maturing others by training in the 4 ways of attracting disciples, and thirdly, training the mind, incorporating the essential practice of the above 2 precepts. From among these 3, we've covered the first, and now we are looking at the second, maturing others, training in the 4 ways of attracting disciples. So to go over those three parts again: maturing oneself by training in the 6 transcendent perfections, secondly, maturing others by training in the 4 ways of attracting disciples, and thirdly, training the mind, incorporating the essential practice of the above 2 precepts. So we've covered the first, and now we begin to look at the second: maturing others by training in the 4 ways of attracting disciples. So what we've been saying, what's being taught here, is that the entrance to all paths, the gateway to all paths, is refuge, and the root or essence of all paths is bodhicitta. To attain the state of perfect enlightenment, the state of enlightenment that transcends the extremes of samsara and nirvana, one must give rise to bodhicitta, and these 5 preliminaries of refuge, bodhicitta, vajrasattva, mandala offering, and guru yoga. If we follow this path of the 5 special preliminaries, where will we? What destination will we reach? The destination of perfect enlightenment. And there's no way to reach that state without giving rise to bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the highway to perfect enlightenment. That's why it's said to be the root of the path, the essence of the path. And more important than cultivating bodhicitta is for bodhicitta to actually dawn in your mind. So one expression or embodiment of bodhicitta is Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who pledged to not manifest enlightenment, not reach enlightenment himself until he'd freed all beings from samsara and established all of them in enlightenment. This is why his name reflects this pledge, this incredible compassion. Chandrizik, or Avalokiteshvara, means to always be gazing with eyes of compassion. And, so where does Avalokiteshvara, for instance, with his 1,000 eyes and 1,000 arms, and his endless compassionate activity for sentient beings, where does that come from? It comes from bodhicitta. So it's bodhicitta that should drive all of our practice, all of our efforts, all of our actions. On the other hand, if you engage in practice and chant the money mantra, Avalokiteshvara's mantra, for instance, but you harbor negative thoughts, and you get irritated, you curse the people around you, then you're not going to get anywhere. The way we make progress on the path to enlightenment is through giving rise to bodhicitta. Look at all of the examples of the Buddhas. You can see that they first entered the path by giving rise to bodhicitta, and their compassionate enlightened activity comes from the power of that bodhicitta. So one aspect of bodhicitta is training others. One aspect of bodhicitta is the 4 ways of attracting disciples. We could say this is the activity of bodhicitta, benefiting others by means of these 4 ways of attracting disciples. And from among all of the different ways that the Buddhas and noble beings benefit others, from all of their compassionate and enlightened activities, the most supreme, the most excellent is the teaching of the Dharma, teaching and sharing the Dharma and ripening beings in that way. Lojin Dhamashiri speaks about this in his text. And to this end, we have the 4 ways of attracting disciples. The bodhisattvas, when you look at the lives and examples of the bodhisattvas, you see how, while training on the path, they, for the sake of enlightenment and for the sake of sentient beings, they sacrifice their body, their lives, their eyes, their limbs, their comfort and security and so on and so forth again and again, out of their commitment to attaining enlightenment, their commitment to benefit beings. The bodhisattvas are willing to make these sacrifices just for the sake of a single sentient being. And they've committed to benefiting all sentient beings without exception. They've committed to benefiting all beings, numerous in number, infinite in number, and for each and every one of those infinite beings, they're willing to go to extraordinary efforts just to benefit a single being. So this is why, for instance, Avalokiteshvara has 1,000 eyes and 1,000 arms to benefit all sentient beings. This is the activity of the bodhisattvas, and Avalokiteshvara is the embodiment of bodhicitta. So this is the kind of activity, compassionate activity, that comes from bodhicitta. So just to illustrate this, to illustrate how bodhisattvas are willing to go to great efforts just to benefit a single sentient being, I'll share a story. So in the past there was a bodhisattva. Okay, well, first of all, there was a couple, a husband and wife. The husband died, and the wife was so distressed and attached to her husband. She just couldn't let go. She couldn't even bear to bury his body or cremate his body. She held onto his corpse week after week, month after month, month after month. It started rotting. It was rotting and decomposing, and of course it absolutely reeked, but still she could not bear to let go of it. So she kept it with her. Wherever she went, she hauled her husband's corpse around with her. No matter how much people pleaded with her, she just would not listen. She couldn't let go. A bodhisattva saw her plight and thought, was filled with compassion. He thought, what can I do to free this woman from her suffering, from this attachment to her husband and to her grief? He thought, that Bodhisattva thought, well, if I try and teach her and help her in that way, I don't think it's going to help. I don't think she's kind of receptive to that at the moment. So he thought, what can I do to help her? And then one day he went and found a female corpse and took it on his back and walked over to where the woman was, the bereaved woman. The woman was talking on and on about how perfect her husband was, how faithful he was, how loving and wonderful their marriage was. And when she saw the bodhisattva, this other man holding a corpse, she thought, well, what's going on with you? And he said, oh, well, I'm in the same situation. My wife died, and she was, as wonderful as your husband. We had such a perfect marriage, and I can't bear to be parted from her, and so on. And so from then on, they stuck together. And so they stuck together. And one day they walked off to the banks of a river. And they settled by the banks of the river for the evening. And so one side, the woman lay down next to the corpse of her husband, and a little further away, the bodhisattva lay down next to the corpse of his supposed deceased wife, right? So they both fell asleep. Then in the middle of the night, the Bodhisattva woke up. And he stood up. He woke himself up, stood up, and he started shouting and screaming. The wife woke up. The woman woke up and said, "My goodness, why are you shouting? What's happened?" He said, "Your husband has run off with my wife. Your husband has run off with my wife." And she said, "What on earth do you mean? He would never do that. He's so faithful. He would never do that." And the Bodhisattva said, "Well, look around you. Where is your husband and where is my wife?" So actually the Bodhisattva, while the woman was asleep, had got up and thrown both corpses into the river. And then made up this story to free the woman for her attachment right. So, and after this, the woman slowly was able to finally let go of her husband, and she regained her life. She got her life back, and she could move on. So this is just one example of the ends to which a bodhisattva is willing to go for the sake of a single being. So when the bodhisattva threw both corpses into the river and then made it seem to the woman like her husband had run off with his wife, and finally she could cut through her attachment right, and this attachment to the idea of a perfect, ever faithful husband, and finally she could let go of. The whole point of all of the Buddha's teachings is to dispel being's ignorance, right? To dispel confusion and ignorance. The Buddha Dharma is like a lamp that dispels the darkness of ignorance. So what is correct, what's incorrect, what it is we should do, what it is we shouldn't do. This is the whole point of the Buddha Dharma, the whole point of studying and contemplating, to gain some clarity and to dispel our confusion. So why are we so attached? Why do we perceive everything as real and fixate on appearances and get so ensnared in attachment, aversion and so on? It's because we don't understand the way things are. We don't understand. We don't understand reality, basically. So how have all of the accomplished practitioners, enlightened ones of the past, become enlightened? How have they reached where they are? Well, by recognizing that all phenomena, all appearances actually are not real. They're just like illusions, just like dreams, and training in that, meaning to familiarizing themselves with that reality to the point where they realize reality, where they directly realize the nature of reality, and thereby cut through their delusion and manifest enlightenment. So the Bodhisattva's activities, the effort he went to help this woman who was so attached to his corpse, help this woman dispel her confusion, right? Let go of her attachment which was in complete discord with reality. If we listen to the teachings of Buddha, we actually put them into practice, we internalize them, then we can attain liberation. Each and every one of us can attain liberation if we put the Buddha's teachings into practice. As Buddha said to Ananda, "Don't lament, Ananda. Don't cry. Don't weep." Buddha said to Ananda, "Don't weep, don't lament, Ananda. The sufferings beings experience are the result of their own karma, their own karmic perceptions. But in spite of that, I have taught the path to liberation. If you follow that path, then you and everyone can attain liberation. So this is the way to liberation. This is the only way to liberation. To receive the Buddha Dharma, receive the teachings, listen to the teachings. These are the teachings of Buddha are undeceiving, unfailing. So if we receive those teachings, then we take them to heart, we internalize them, then we can attain liberation for ourselves. We can free ourselves from samsara by realizing the truth, realizing reality. So all of us have the ability to do this, the opportunity to do this, and we have this opportunity, but this is the only opportunity, the only way to reach liberation. As Buddha himself said, I cannot pluck you out of samsara and place you in enlightenment. I cannot dispel your suffering with my hand, and so on. We have to put the teachings into practice ourselves and attain liberation for ourselves. So in short, that's how the Buddhas benefit beings, how the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas benefit beings, essentially through teaching the Dharma, showing them the path to liberation, so that they then can follow it themselves, accomplish it themselves. So in this vein we have the method for maturing others, training in the 4 ways of attracting disciples. The 4 ways of attracting disciples are actually the enlightened activity of the Buddhas. Like Rinpoche said before, Lojin Dhamashiri said anyway, the 4 ways of attracting disciples are the way that Buddhas and noble beings benefit sentient beings. But nevertheless, even ordinary beings like ourselves need to train in these 4 ways of attracting disciples to some extent, according to our ability, right? So according to our ability, we need to train in the 4 ways of attracting disciples, no matter who we are. For instance, there are lots of lamas and monks here, and some of them might give Dharma teachings, to large groups of people, so that's one way they can help others. But then if you're a lay person, an ordinary practitioner, you might think, well, how can I possibly help other beings? How can I enact these 4 ways of attracting disciples? Well, according to one's capacity, that's how. So the first is to give, to be generous, to attract disciples through generosity. So we can practice generosity no matter what our situation, right? So according to our capacity, according to our situation, we can practice generosity. We can reduce our stinginess, reduce our clinging, and train ourselves to become more generous. We can do this in our lives by giving to others, being hospitable, being generous. We can do it through different types of practice like sang and sur and so on. We can also practice we can give the gift of Dharma when we practice sur and the like, where we chant lines of Buddha's teachings. Like if you're familiar with the sur liturgies, usually they end with the gift of the Dharma. Often the giving of the body liturgies end with the same thing, several verses of Buddha's teachings, which you recite as a gift of Dharma to other beings. Similarly, so giving to those around you, giving to your parents, caring for your parents, that's a way of practicing generosity, right? Training in generosity. And then likewise with giving the gift of Dharma, encouraging others on the path of Dharma. So whether it be one's parents or one's children or one's closest friends, those who trust and have confidence in one, encourage them to practice the Dharma, encourage them to study the Dharma, and take them on pilgrimage, and so on and so forth. And in that way you're helping those beings establish the causes for a positive rebirth, for positive future lives. These days it's very easy to go on pilgrimage, right? You can go in the car or on the plane. It's very easy to travel around to these different sacred sites. And the merit accumulated is just vast, absolutely vast. And will help guarantee positive rebirth in the future. So there's so much benefit to that. And of course you can benefit beings by teaching the Dharma, sharing the Dharma, but actually even more beneficial than that is to practice the Dharma yourself. So to practice oneself and also to practice as you preach, right? To practice as you preach. That itself will help inspire others, set an example for others and encourage them to follow your example, right? And to practice themselves. So you can start like this, applying these 4 ways of attracting disciples according to your capacity, according to your circumstances. And then step by step you'll reach the point where you can engage in even weightier practices like so you can practice in these ways I mentioned, and then step by step you reach the point where you can engage in even weightier practices like exchanging self and other, and so on. And this is how, step by step, this is how we progress on the path, how we traverse the 5 paths to enlightenment. So by practicing according to your capacity, doing what you can right now, and then step by step improving. So starting where you are, basically. Once we've fully matured our own mind streams by training in the precepts of bodhicitta in action, as we've just seen, we need to bring others to maturity, and the principal method or practice for achieving this comprises the 4 ways of attracting disciples. So we're on page 185. Once we've fully matured, or you could say ripened, our own mind streams. So the word matured also means to ripen, in the way that a fruit on a tree slowly ripens over time. So by practicing and training in bodhicitta in action, the 6 paramitas and so on, we mature our mind streams, we make our mind streams ripe. And then we need to bring others to maturity in the same way. And to do this, we apply the 4 ways of attracting disciples, as I said, according to your capacity. So you might not be able to, according to your capacity, in whatever way you can. In ornament of the sutras lists them in order as follows. Generosity is held to be the same. Teaching them, practicing them oneself, and inducing others to practice them are termed speaking pleasantly, acting accordingly, and giving appropriate advice. So these are the 4 ways of attracting others. 4 ways of attracting disciples, sorry. So one has to practice generosity. Likewise, one has to practice the rest of the 6 paramitas. If a teacher is very stingy, then they're not going to inspire others, right? So generosity is so important. Being generous, then teaching them, then teaching others the Dhamma, and practicing them oneself. So generosity is the first step, being generous. And then speaking pleasantly, so making a connection with people, right, by engaging in pleasing conversation, forming a relationship and connection by speaking with them in pleasant and appropriate ways. And then once you've formed a connection, established a good relationship, then acting accordingly. So practicing as you preach, we could say, like setting a good example. And then finally giving appropriate advice. This means finally giving them, sharing the genuine Dhamma, genuine pure Dhamma, completely free of the 8 worldly concerns, and establishing people on the path of genuine Dhamma, genuine authentic Dhamma. So leading them onto the path of genuine, pure Dhamma, step by step. So this is the order in which these 4 are practiced. Now for their purpose and significance. Since they're the methods for bringing them benefit, for making them comprehend, and for making them engage, and similarly for making them continue the practice, the ways of attracting disciples are to be known as 4. How they are practiced is shown in the heaped lotuses, gracefully summoning with the beckoning hand of generosity and receiving with pleasant conversation, reassure by acting according to the teaching, and give good advice according to need. So these are actually lines from the Tantras, in the Tantric scripture. So gracefully summoning with the beckoning hand of generosity by giving food, clothing, and other material things. So, for instance, we can look at the example of His Holiness Peno Rinpoche when the Tibetans first escaped Tibet and arrived in India. There were no monasteries, no monastic sanghas, nothing. But then Peno Rinpoche, he began by establishing Ngondro monastery. And offering shelter and food to monks who wish to those who wish to be monks and stay and study at Ngondro. So providing for practitioners. This is an example of generosity, right? Of attracting disciples through generosity. And And look how Namjoling Monastery has flourished, right? So I spent a year at Namjoling Monastery several decades back. The way the monastery was managed, the way the Sangha was taken care of, the effort to which Penra Rishi went. I don't think there's anywhere I doubt there's any monastery or anywhere where the Sangha is was so well cared for as they were or as they are at Namjoling Monastery. So again, that was an example of generosity, right? This activity of generosity and receiving with pleasant conversation. So, first of all, summoning beings, gathering beings with the beckoning hand of generosity, providing them with the necessities like shelter and food and clothing. This helps gather disciples, right? And then speaking to them pleasantly. So, in a pleasant, gentle way, in an appropriate way, a way that kind of relates to them, to their interests, their situation. In an appropriate way. And then slowly bring them into the Dharma, skillfully and gently. If from the outset a teacher, before they've established a relationship with students, with people, if immediately they scold and criticize and so on, then most students won't be able to take this, right? So hence the importance of, first of all, speaking pleasantly, right? And forming a connection in this way. There's very few disciples who are like Jetsun Milarepa and who can just take such harsh scoldings, especially from the outset, like Jetsun Milarepa did from his guru, Mapalot Sawa. Then reassure by acting according to the teaching. So this is so important to you yourself, for oneself to act in accord with the teaching, to live in accord with the Dharma. Otherwise you can end up embarrassing yourself and bringing shame upon the teachings. People will lose faith in you. So those who are Dhamma teachers, who are monks, monastics and so on, it's so important that they live in accord with the teachings, that they practice as they preach. Otherwise, just teaching others to practice and do this and that and not practice oneself. To not practice oneself, but to tell others they need to practice. To tell others to observe their monastic vows but not observe them purely oneself. Well, people won't trust you. If they see you're not practicing as you preach, people won't trust you. They'll be suspicious and doubtful of you and what you say. And give good advice according to need. So Buddha, with his all-knowing wisdom, could could just intuit what teachings each and every being needed. Or this person is more suited to the Shravaka path. This person is more suited to the teaching on independence. This person is more suited to this approach, and so on and so forth. And he would give customized teachings according to beings' inclination and their needs. We don't have that kind of clairvoyance. But nevertheless, by teaching the Dharma, the pure Dharma that leads to enlightenment, that frees one from samsara, we can give according to need, share the Dharma according to need. Gracefully summon those who would be suitable as disciples and who are not yet included among your disciples by giving them appropriate material gifts. Once you've brought them into your circle, draw them onto the perfect path with pleasant, virtuous conversation that suits their way of thinking and appeals to them. In order that they don't turn away again but set out on the path and develop a real interest, reassure them by acting in accord with the teachings you've given. So again, we can see these four ways of attracting disciples enacted by His Holiness the Penna Rinpoche. When he established Namdroling in India, he provided rooms and food and basically all the basic necessities to the monks, to whoever wanted to come and study there. And he spoke really pleasantly to all of the monastics and all of the kempos he invited to teach there, offering them katas and really praising their accomplishment in learning and the importance and virtue of Shedra, the importance of engaging in this kind of study, really encouraging everyone, extolling their virtues, and in this way encouraging people in their own studies. So in Penna Rinpoche's activities at Namdroling, we can see these four ways of attracting disciples, how Penna Rinpoche enacted these, and also the fruition of that, the fruition of his efforts. Think of how the great institute that Namdroling has grown into, and all of the kempos and great qualified teachers who have come from there, many of whom are here in this audience. So it's very important. Generosity is the first of these four ways of attracting disciples. So generosity, material generosity, is important to be able to give. It is very important, but that said, if you prioritize this and you think, oh well, I'm a lama, I'm a teacher, and so first I need to raise a lot of money so that I can provide very handsomely for my students, so that I can build these monks' quarters and cover their food expenses and so on and so forth, and to that end you neglect actually your main responsibility of teaching the Dharma, and you go off, you get really busy traveling overseas and trying to fundraise and get sponsors and stuff. That's a mistake. Generosity means that whatever material possessions and money and so on you get, you should use those for the sake of your students, for the sake of Dharma. Not that you should prioritize gathering money and material things. So, whoever you are, monastic, Ngapa, lay practitioner, you need to practice according to your capacity and circumstances in this way, that as best as you can. If you're a Kempo or a Truku and you end up with a lot of wealth that potentially you could give to others, but then you become really attached to that wealth and you're not able to give it to others, you're not able to actually make use of it, then all that wealth you have is not going to actually serve its purpose. It's not going to be a cause for gathering disciples around you. If on the other hand, a teacher a teacher might be quite poor, but if they're really open and open-minded and spacious and easygoing, they have these wonderful qualities, then those qualities will gather students around them, right? So like Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche, he was such a pure renunciate. He had rarely had anything to give to his students. I mean, even when I say anything, I mean like even a spare cup of tea, an extra cup of tea. The very few occasions where very rare occasion where he would offer a student a cup of tea, it was such a privilege, such a joy to sit in Khenpo Rinpoche's flimsy hut, in his tiny flimsy hut, sit at his feet and get a cup of tea, just a small cup of tea. But it was such a big deal, It was such a huge gift to get that cup of tea, and the tea was just ordinary tea. Whatever tea he made for himself, that would be the tea that you'd get, and there was no special cup or special tea for a special guest. Whatever tea Rinpoche had was the tea others got, and whether the guest was a lama themselves or whether they were a simple monk or whether they were a relative or a layperson, it was the same tea. So he didn't discriminate in this way at all. And the cup that you'd be given to drink the tea, and it wasn't never washed, so it was this kind of dirty, grimy cup. But still, if any of us, the few occasions any of us got to have tea in Rinpoche's hut with him, it was just like such a treasure. And then, after that we'd go out and say like, oh, I got to have a cup of tea with Rinpoche today. It was like, we'd been to a 5-star hotel and had a banquet. And so this is how Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche was. Even when Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche came to see him, or Penno Rinpoche or whoever, there was no, laying a special seat, preparing a special seat from them, or a higher seat or anything. It was just the same grimy mat. Whoever you were, you just were received and offered the same grimy seat, the same ordinary tea in the same ordinary cup. This is how Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche was. He was, I guess we could say, he was just such a pure renunciate and so straightforward. He was a truly realized master. One time he was invited to greet Panchen Lama, or Panchen Lama wanted to meet him. He was sort of asked or invited to travel to a certain point in the road and to meet Panchen Lama there. Chögyam Rinpoche said, no need, I don't need to do that, I won't go, thanks. He said, Panchen Lama is Amitabha, I pray every evening to Amitabha, so it's fine for me just to see Amitabha. Panchen Lama, who's Amitabha like that. He said, no need to go and see the human Panchen Lama with his big ears and big belly. And so he didn't go. There's also one time when I didn't catch the setting and circumstance and so on, and Dodo Rinpoche went to see Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche and offered him 3 prostrations. This is pretty much unheard of for lamas like Dodo Rinpoche and Shadow Rinpoche to prostrate to another teacher, another contemporary master. But Dodo Rinpoche offered Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche 3 prostrations. That just shows the kind of lama that Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche was. And these masters like this, they benefit beings in vast ways with their great compassion. And they do this by means of the 4 ways of attracting disciples. So those who are lamas, trupus, who are supposed teachers, we need all to offer service to the Buddha Dharma. We need to work for the Buddha Dharma, serve the Buddha Dharma, the teachings. And how do we do that? Well, we do it by means of the 4 ways of attracting disciples according to our capacity, our circumstances. So we need to loosen the bind of stinginess and learn to be generous. Otherwise there won't be much benefit. So we act with loving kindness and with compassion. Loving kindness is the wish for others to have happiness and the cause of happiness. Compassion is the wish for others to be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. So there's a slight difference between these two, love and compassion. For instance, when a mother bird lays an egg, then they sit on the egg right to keep it warm, to ensure that it can grow and eventually hatch. And then once the egg hatches, then they focus on going out to finding food for their chicks, make sure they're comfortable and safe. What can they do to make them comfortable and safe and happy? All of these efforts are signs of love, right? Compassion, on the other hand, is wishing that beings be free of suffering and their causes, and the cause of suffering. So just like a seed will sprout when all the necessary conditions come together, soil, sun, water, and so on. Likewise, when you have love and compassion, then bodhicitta will arise. So love and compassion are the causes and conditions for bodhicitta. Okay, so now we're in the third section, incorporating the essential practice of the above 2 precepts, training the mind. So the causal mind training is to meditate deeply on love and compassion. As just explained, the main training, which is to take the vow of bodhicitta in each of the 6 periods of the day and night. So to take the bodhisattva vow by reciting the liturgy, for instance, of the liturgy we recite at the beginning of each session in the mornings, or at least to bring to mind bodhicitta and to renew one's bodhicitta 6 times, meaning 3 times a day, 3 times a night. Then thirdly, training in conduct, which is to dedicate one's positive actions to the welfare of other beings and so on. And to exert oneself in the practice of sending happiness and receiving suffering. So we cannot yet completely give up everything, ourselves, all our possessions and so on. For the sake of the 3 jewels, we're not yet there. So then how to proceed? Well, we should proceed according to our ability, so start where we are. Start from giving a handful of rice, a handful of whatever you have, a small gift. Start with small steps and proceed from there. That's how we train, in generosity and everything else. Training in this way, we dedicate all our positive actions to the welfare of other beings, and we exert ourselves in the practice of giving our happiness to others and taking on their suffering. And we do this with the inhalation, with the cycle of our breath. So as we breathe out, imagine that all of my happiness, my well-being, my good fortune is being given to other beings, is exiting me and dissolving into sentient beings. And then as you breathe in, you should imagine that you're breathing in all of the misfortune, the illness, the suffering of beings. You're taking it into you on your breath, drawing it into you on your breath, and it dissolves into you. This is how we train in this mindset, this exchange. And if we train in this way, then we'll reach the point, we'll develop the ability to actually do this, actually put this exchange into action. When we see someone who's suffering, you'll be ready without hesitation to do whatever you can to give whatever you have to alleviate their suffering. You'll be willing and ready and able to give whatever happiness, good fortune, good circumstances you have to others for their benefit. You'll reach the, you'll develop the ability to really do this. If you train, you can develop the ability to literally take others' suffering and literally give others your happiness. Like the story of a master who saw someone throwing a stone at a dog, and as the stone hit the dog, he yelled out as if in pain. And the students around him or someone around him thought, "Oh, this lama's, he's just putting on a show. He's acting like a fraud. This is, not really happening." And the lama said, "Well, if you don't believe me, bring me the stone." And the stone that was thrown at the dog, they brought it to him. It was a kind of triangular-shaped stone. Then he lifted up his robe and showed a wound, like a bruise, exactly that shape, a fresh bruise on his thigh. So he had literally taken the pain of the stone from the dog into himself. So it is possible to reach that point. The bodhisattvas really have this ability, and that ability comes from training. So our self-clinging, our conception of self, our fixation on self is the cause of all suffering, the cause of all these afflictions, the cause of all suffering, the cause of all problems. So exchanging self with others is a way to remedy, to reduce and undo this self-clinging. By training and exchanging the self and other, your self-clinging will be undone. When your self-clinging is undone, then the root of samsara will be severed. Samsara itself will come to an end. In the meditation chapter of The Way of Bodhisattva, Shantideva teaches the equalizing of self and other, exchange of self and other, and finally cherishing self and other. These are such important practices. In the past there was a geshe called Chegawa, a Kadampa geshe. So we're talking here about exchanging self and other, right? And so here on page 187 we have these lines: give the others victory and gain, take upon yourself defeat and loss. These are lines from the 8 verses on mind training by Langtangpa. I hope I got the name right. So Geshe Chegawa. So these are from the 8 verses of mind training by Langtangpa. And so Chegawa, this Geshe, Kadampa Geshe, Chegawa came across these lines, and and learned that they were the teaching of Langtangpa. So then he set out to meet Langtangpa, but on his way he met a leper who had come from that area, and he said, "Is the Master Langtangpa there, or where is he?" And he was told, "Oh, actually he passed away last year." But then the leper said, "Well, but these teachings on giving others victory and gain and taking defeat and loss upon oneself, you can receive these teachings from his disciples." Then he learned that these disciples were he was told that these fightings were engaged in some kind of conflict and squabble. And then Chikawa thought, well, if they're engaged in that kind of conflict and squabbling, then obviously they don't really have this teaching of Langtangpa. I mean, they haven't really internalized it. But actually that wasn't what was going on. Chikawa had misunderstood. These two disciples were both insistent that they were the heirs of their teacher, but they were each insistent that the other was better qualified to take the place of their, to be their teacher's regent, to be their teacher's successor. And so this is what the so-called squabble was about. It was just out of their deep respect and reverence for each other. They were insisting that no, the other, take their teacher's place, and then the other one was insisting, no, you must take our teacher's place because you're more qualified. So then Chingwa heard of another Lama who was teaching very large assemblies of students in their hundreds of thousands. So he went to see this teacher to see if he had this teaching by Langtangpa and if he could receive it from him. So it's a Kadam Geshe Sharapa. He went to see. He went to see this teacher. He offered his zen on the ground as a gesture of respect and requested the teacher to take a seat and give him and answer some of his questions. He said, in my travels I came across these lines of teachings by Langtangpa from his 8 verses of training the mind, give the others victory and gain, take upon yourself defeat and loss, and they really touched me, they really moved me, made a big impression, and I really want to receive this teaching. Do you have this teaching? Can you give it to me? If yes, I will request it from you. If not, then I will continue on my way. And the teacher replied, he said, well, if your wish is to attain enlightenment, if that is your goal, then you must exchange self with others. You cannot attain enlightenment without exchanging self with others. So whether you like it or not, whether it suits you or not, whether it moves you or not, this is the practice you must do if you want to attain enlightenment. There is no other way. You must exchange self and other. And he said to the master, Chegawa, his master said, so this is the heart of my practice, and this is the heart of Langtampa's instruction that has moved you, and this is the heart of my practice. So yes, I do have these teachings on the exchange of self and other. And then in response to this, Langtampa decided to stay. He stayed at the feet of this master and received teachings from him and guidance from him for a long time. So the exchange of self and other is so important. We all have to train in this. To train in it literally or to a significant degree might be very challenging for most of us, many of us, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't and cannot train in it according to our capacity. We always have to start where we are and train according to our capacity. So we can start by just imagining in small ways, like for instance, if you're up in Humla and in the winter and it's really cold, and then you get to put on some nice warm clothes and warm yourself by the fire, and you're enjoying that warmth and that relief from cold, then you can think, oh, may all other beings enjoy warmth and comfort in the same way that I am now. May all other beings enjoy this kind of warmth and comfort. So this is how you can begin training. And this is very accessible for all of us, right? Whenever you're experiencing some happiness, well-being, a moment of comfort and relief, you can just think, extend your thoughts to all other beings and think, may they have this pleasure as well. When you're suffering, you can think, or when you're suffering or uncomfortable or ill at ease, you can just think, oh, may I free all other beings from their suffering, all other beings who are going through the same thing, may they be relieved from that. So we can start in this way. All the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. So this is how it is. Cheating others, deceiving others, hurting others, lying to others. Well, all of those things are done with personal, like from selfish aims, right? If you lie and steal and cheat, you're doing all of that in search of your own happiness, your personal happiness. So all of the negativity, all of the harm in the world comes from selfish aims, as it says here, wanting pleasure for oneself. And all the joy the world contains comes from wishing happiness for others. These words, this verse is from the way of a bodhisattva. If I do not interchange my happiness for others' pain, enlightenment will never be attained, and even in samsara I shall have no joy. So think of the story we told earlier about the bodhisattva who, in order to help the woman who was so attached to her husband's corpse, he went and found a corpse himself, pretended to have lost his wife and so on. He went to that extreme, those efforts, those kinds of efforts, just to help a single person. So in this way, if I do not interchange my happiness for others' pains, enlightenment will never be attained, and I will never have any joy. So, if you do the opposite of this exchange of self and other, you try and give your suffering to others. You try to load your suffering on others, and you try to take the happiness of others for yourself. And all you'll experience is suffering, misery. If you do the opposite though, you give your happiness away to others and take their suffering on yourself, that is actually the route to happiness. So from beginningless time up until now, throughout all of our rebirths, we've been seeking our own happiness. In this way, we've been seeking our own happiness by focusing merely on our own pleasure, our own personal gain, securing our personal gain and comfort and so on. But this approach hasn't worked right. We've just been creating our own suffering. The selfish mindset has just creates suffering. So if we really want happiness, if we want to fulfill our wish, our search for happiness, then we need to reverse our mindset. We need to reverse our selfish mindset, and instead of seeking happiness just for ourselves, we need to seek happiness for others. We need to train in giving our happiness away to others and train in taking on others' suffering. And we can train in this through the practice of Tonglen, taking and giving and taking, by using the inhalation and exhalation of our breath, right? As I explained before. And this might be uncomfortable at first because we're so deeply habituated to our selfish mindset, to just focusing on our own personal concerns. So this might be, or will be uncomfortable at first, but we have to do it. This is the road to happiness. It's like if you're sick with cancer or some illness, if you want to recover your health, then you need to go through some uncomfortable, painful treatment, right? The treatment's painful, but the result of the treatment is happiness. And again, we should train slowly, right? So we can begin, like some students have begun by just giving from one hand to the other. Like some students who are so bound by stinginess, some students of Buddha, that they were taught to give, just give from their right hand to their left hand to the right. They started from there, and then they were slowly able to give very small things to others, and then bit by bit, as they become more used to giving, their power of generosity increased. So it's the same with exchanging self and other. So if we fail to train in this interchange, the exchange of self and other, enlightenment will never be attained, and even in samsara I shall have no joy. This is also from the way of Bodhisattva. This means imagining yourself, so give the others victory and gain, take upon yourself defeat and loss. This means imagining yourself gladly, willingly, unhesitatingly, taking on the whole burden of being's misery, its cause, namely all the actions and afflictive emotions that the entirety of parent beings' filling space have accumulated at this time without beginning, and the experiences of suffering that result. And completely giving all those beings one by one the whole of the merit you've accumulated in your series of lives and the resulting experiences of physical well-being and mental happiness. Train to give and take alternately, mount them both upon your breath. So here we've arrived at some very crucial points, or a very crucial point. Our parents are so precious. There's really no one more precious than our parents. Parents who've given us this body. Let's think of Buddha Shakyamuni himself. There's no one greater than Buddha Shakyamuni. Even Buddha Shakyamuni traveled to the Tushita heaven in order to repay his mother's kindness, and he spent many weeks there teaching his mother. Similarly, Gesa of Ling, he traveled to the hell realms to protect his mother. Jason Milarepa, heeding his mother's words, he studied black magic and did all manner of things. So, our mothers, our parents, are so incredibly precious. So for all beings filling space, all parent beings filling space, so these days people do not cherish their parents. They don't repay their kindness, they don't appreciate them, they don't acknowledge and repay their kindness, they don't care for them. Often they just abandon them, cast them aside, neglect them. So a story to this end, this is a story from recent times. There were some parents who were neglected by their children. The father died, the mother was alone. She ended up becoming a kind of beggar or wanderer. She ended up at Pachupachinath in an old person's home. She became so frail and weak and was living very poorly in this old people's home for actually 10 or 20 years. So this woman was in an old person's home for many years, with no contact with her children. She'd been completely abandoned by her children. Then there was a piece of land somewhere in Kathmandu that had previously, like several decades back, had been owned by someone, but then it had, the owners of the land had disappeared, and years went by, no one was taking ownership of the land, so some people started looking into it, and they thought anyway, eventually they found out that this old lady in the old people's home was actually the rightful owner of this land. It was her inheritance. So overnight, she went from being impoverished old lady in this old person's home to being incredibly rich, the owner of a very large piece of land. And her story, because it was so extraordinary, her story was printed in the paper along with her photo. And when her photo came out in the paper, eventually her children, who were overseas doing their own thing, they saw this, and it's very shameful, but then seeing that their mother was now rich and what have you, they flew back to Nepal and got back in touch. And they were reunited. Mother and children were reunited. And actually there were lawyers advising the mother to keep the land in her own name and basically protect her land, her new wealth, from her children. But the mother didn't want to believe that her children would do something like that to her, that they would let her down or deceive her, take her wealth. So she didn't listen to this advice, and in the meantime, her parents, her children, who had now flown back from the US or wherever it was, reunited with her. They spoke a lot of sweet talk, and they made lots of empty promises to her. We're going to look after you, you're our mother, we love you so much. Now that we're reunited, we're never going to let you go again. Come with us back to the US, we'll take care of you, da 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 da. And she believed what she heard. But all of this sweet talk was just empty talk, and the children ended up deceiving their mother again, taking her wealth and just neglecting her once more. This story was in the Kantipur news. In Jigme Lingpa's Treasury of Precious Qualities, and speaking about the preciousness of mothers and parents, he quotes, he recalls Lord Atisha's sevenfold instruction on giving rise to bodhicitta. 7 gradual steps to generate bodhicitta. First of all, acknowledging that all beings have been once mother, acknowledging the kindness they showed us when they were our mothers, giving rise to the wish to repay their kindness, generating to that end, generating a heart of love, and so on. 7 steps, the last of which is giving rise to bodhicitta itself. So all of this is to say that our mothers are so incredibly kind. The kindness they've shown us in giving us this body, looking after us as a newborn baby, feeding us, clothing us, cleaning us, day after day, year after year, in our early years. So the root of bodhicitta is acknowledging the kindness of our mothers, and especially of our mother in this life. This is the root of bodhicitta. Whenever we talk about bodhicitta in the teachings and in the liturgies for giving rise for bodhicitta, there's always mention of mother beings, mother beings. You cannot talk about bodhicitta without talking about mothers and the kindness of mothers, the kindness of one's mother. Acknowledging and recollecting the kindness of our mothers, really feeling this desire to repay their kindness, feeling a deep love and affection for them, compassion, the pure wish to benefit them, and then bodhicitta. So she's quoting some lines from Jigme Lingpa's Treasury of Precious Qualities, which he then explains further in his own commentary, his auto-commentary on that text, the Chariot of the Two Truths. So these acknowledging the kindness of our mothers is so incredibly important. Are the parents of this life, all parents, and especially the parents of this life. If we can't do that, we can't really recollect that kindness from our depths of our hearts, then it's really not possible for us to give rise to bodhicitta. That is just not possible. And this is discussed in the teachings, the meditations on the kindness of our mothers and parents. This is found in the words of my perfect teacher, and many of you will have heard these and heard me speak about these things many times. And in the Buddha's sutras, so for instance, reflect on what our mothers went through when they were pregnant with us, right, when we were in the womb. All the physical discomfort, the fatigue, the nausea, everything they went through during their pregnancy, when they were pregnant with us. Buddha talks about this in one of his sutras. There's many folios meditating on the experience of mothers when pregnant with their children, the sacrifice and kindness they show us during those 9 months. This is how all of us began. This is where all of us came from. We came from the wombs of our mother. No matter how old you are, even the oldest people here in the audience, they came from the wombs of their mother. Then think about the suffering the mother goes through during birth, the fear that floods their mind. Am I going to survive this? Am I going to survive this? Is my child going to survive this? The feeling of their body splitting open as they give birth. This incredible physical pain. It's said that the pain a mother goes through while giving birth is like the intense torment of death. It's the same degree of torment, the same degree of time. So these days with modern medicine, fewer people die from giving birth. Fewer women die from giving birth. But it's only in so these days up in Humla, for instance, our remote areas. Only in recent years, we started getting helicopters being able to take women who are like having complications in birth down to the hospitals. But even in recent years, we've seen many women die during childbirth from complications. It's a real danger, right, for mothers every time they give birth. So the mother goes through this incredible pain, mental and physical both, when giving birth. And when finally their child is born, they're just, in spite of their body being racked with pain, bleeding and what have you, they're just filled with joy and love for their child, for this child that they've given birth to. And now their every concern is for that child's well-being. They think nothing of cleaning their child's nappies, from wiping their shit from their child's bottom, from if their child pees or poos in their lap. They think nothing of it. Their only thought is, oh, I need to clean my child. I need to make them comfortable again. I need to make them warm. I need to fill their stomach. They breastfeed their children, then whatever food they get themselves, they always give the best to their children. And for years, the mother, as parents, and especially the mother, will not sleep well. They'll sleep very lightly because their attention is so focused on their children, right? They nurse their children, holding them to the warmth of their chest. And if their child gets a cold or a virus or something, the mother is overwhelmed with anxiety. Is my child going to die? Is my child going to recover? They're so concerned for their child. They would rather die than have their child die. They would rather die themselves than have their child die. They are ready to give up their own life to save their child. This is the mindset of all mothers. And some mothers will have very uncaring husbands who even beat them, neglect them, abuse them. But the mothers will endure even that abuse for the sake of their children, thinking, "Oh, I will put up with this suffering for the sake of my children, so that they at least can know their father, so they at least can have the love of their father." The mother just makes endless sacrifices for the sake of their children. A father might abandon his wife and children and go off to do his own thing, but a mother is very unlikely to ever abandon her children, no matter what difficulties she's faced with. Poverty, a poor reputation, discomfort, hardship. She will stick by her children. They are her priority. This is the love our parents show us. This is the love our mother shows us. There is no one who has shown us greater guidance than our parents, and especially our mother. So this being the case, to neglect this kindness and to repay this kindness with neglect, abuse, there's nothing more indecent, nothing more appalling than that. Jigmenupa says this himself. So, thinking of having acknowledged or have been our mothers in the past, we need to recollect their kindness in this way and give rise to the fervent wish to repay their kindness. We need to cultivate love for our kind parents. And compassion, wishing they be free from suffering, from all types of suffering. And then the wish to not just fulfill their mundane needs, not just to make them comfortable and happy on a mundane level, but to establish them on the path to ultimate lasting happiness, the path of Dharma, the path to Buddhahood. Buddha Shakyamuni's father, even after Buddha attained enlightenment, become a great teacher and so on, he just could not tame his father. His father was so filled with pride, so proud about being the father of this great being. So no matter what Buddha taught him, it just didn't seep in. Eventually Buddha sent his disciple Moggallana to teach his father. And eventually Moggallana, with his own skillful means, managed to tame the king's pride, the pride of Buddha Shakyamuni's father, and eventually establish him on the path. So Buddha Shakyamuni was so concerned about his parents and determined to repay their kindness. To this end, he travelled up to Shushita heaven to see his mother, who'd taken rebirth there, and taught her, but he struggled to benefit his father. His father was just so proud, look at me, I'm the father of this great being. But Buddha Shakyamuni did not give up, right? He tried so many things, and when he failed, he then sent his disciple Moggallana, and he succeeded. So this was because he was so vividly aware of the kindness of his parents and determined to repay that kindness. Let's dedicate the merit and stop here for a break.